To give you a concrete idea of how Vue.js works, I'm going to redo the previous example we did in jQuery about the comments that can be added one by one using Vue.js. So this is the index.html we had under jQuery. We were then adding comments one by one here on the basis of this input field here. To do it with Vue, the first thing I do is I remove the import of jQuery. It's not needed anymore. And also I need to give to specify which element in this page is going to be the target of the Vue correspondence. Vue will keep a correspondence between HTML and so the DOM tree of HTML and the JavaScript, and I need to specify what element of the page will contain this correspondence, will be the area for the correspondence. So here it will be this one, and I give an ID Vue target. You will see that I will use it later in the code to define the correspondence, okay? So here we'll go the comments, and here we were adding one by one div of class is equal to block, okay, containing a comment. This is what we were doing in jQuery. So here I produce one of these divs, okay? But I also say that I want to produce one of these divs for each comment in a comment list. So I say v-for, where v-for is a Vue directive that says build these elements one per element of a list. And I say v-for is equal to c in comment list. Okay, so we'll have a list of comments in Vue that will drive the presentation of the comments here. For each of these comments in the list, I'm going to have one of these divs, and the content of this div is just going to be C itself. So I write C in these braces, which will mean essentially to Vue, fill here the content of C. Okay, so this will generate the comments. And to do this, I go to Vue. This is index.js. I already completed it with some scaffolding code that we will use in every one of our classes. Let's read it slowly. I define an app as an empty object, and then I define init to be a function that takes an application and fills it in, so that when I call init later, it will fill in my app object properly, okay? And given this app object in this init function, I say app data is equal to nothing. Here will go the app data, and in fact here I will put the comment list. Here you define the data that Vue has to keep in a correspondence between DOM tree and the JavaScript. So I have a comment list that I want to be kept in correspondence, which is initialized to the empty list. Okay, here will be methods. We'll use them in a short while. You see that this Vue, this is where I create app.Vue, which is the Vue object. Okay, in which I specify which element in the page has to be the target of the correspondence. I specify the data for Vue, which is app data, which is this one, and I specify the methods that I will tell you in a moment, that are these methods. The initialization, we don't need to do anything in particular, and then we will initialize the app. Okay, once it's all done. So far I've just created this comment list here that corresponds to this comment list here. Okay, I declare it in the data, in app data, that is then the data of Vue, because this comment list will be mirrored its content between the DOM tree and the JavaScript. Okay, so this is all very good, but I still have to figure out what to do with the input area, right? Because in the input area I need to be able to grab the value of the input field and put it in the comment list whenever somebody presses the button. So there are two problems. So first, how do I fish out the value of an input field? So I don't need either of these two things, okay? And the only thing that I need is this vModel directive, and I can call this new comment. A vmodel directive, we have seen two directives. One is v-for and the other one is vmodel here. A vmodel directive says, oh, anything that is the content of the input field has to be reflected in the value of this new comment JavaScript variable. The JavaScript variable, I declare it just like the comment list here among the variables that are part of the correspondence. So I say new comment. Initially I set it to empty because I want the input field to be empty. Okay? So this gives me a way to have a JavaScript variable whose content reflects in real time the content of the input field. So this is already good. The last thing missing is adding some behavior to this button, so that when I click it, this new comment that will be a string can be added to this comment list. Okay? So to do this, well, I actually don't need the ID of the button anymore. Okay? And I need to define a click behavior for this button. And so I do this by saying add click. Okay? So in general in Vue, I can use the @ sign and the event name to define an event that is going to be handled. And I say that this is going to be handled by a function that I'm going to write that is called add comment. Okay? So I want that every time the button is clicked, add comment is called. What is add comment? Well, we have seen that new comment and comment list are variables that are kept in correspondence, right? They are kept here. Comment list and new comment. Instead, add comment is a method. It's invoked when an event happens, and it is a method that is part of the correspondence between DOM3 and JavaScript. So here I say a method is add comment, and when it occurs I have to call a particular function that I call app.addComment. I haven't written this function yet, okay? I have to remember to write it. In fact, let me write it now. I can say app.addComment. This is a function. Okay, and so I define it as a function, I guess. I can add some semicolons like parsley. And what does this function have to do? Well, it has to take the new comment and add it to the comment list. This is actually easy to do because I can say app.vue.commentList, okay, dot push to add an element to it, and I push into it app.vue.newComment. Right? So this app data is fed to Vue as data, right? When I created a new Vue object. And so to access it, I say app.vue.newComment. Okay, so this is a new comment. I take it and I add it to the list of the comments. And that's almost it. The other thing I need to say is app.vue.newComment is equal to empty. So this will clear the comment so that I can write another one. Okay? And I believe this is it. So you see that the state of the page is driven by these two data that determine how the layout looks like, and by this method that acts as an event handler for the events in the DOM tree. This is what establishes the correspondence. Okay? So let me see whether this works. So this is Firefox. It's a special edition of Firefox that I keep for development. And what makes it special is that I installed as an extension the Vue tools, the Vue Dev tools, which makes Vue debugging much easier. Okay, but so I loaded the page, the index page of my application Vue comments. I can load it, and this is what I get. Okay, and now here I can say, for example, hello. I click here, and it seems to work. So miraculously, we have not actually made mistakes. Well, it was not very complicated, but this works. And so if we look at the debug console, we can look at the console. A good idea when you develop in Vue is always to check the console to check that there are no errors. If you make a silly mistake, it will be listed here, okay? Let me give you a very common example of silly mistake, perhaps. A silly mistake is to break the correspondence between the data. So instead of comment list, I say comment list with a misspelling, okay? This would break the correspondence. And if I reload this page, okay, and if I look at the console will tell me Vue warn, a property or method comment list is not defined on the instance of Vue, but is referenced during render. So Vue is particularly kind to tell me exactly what is happening. One reason of the kindness is this. If you notice, I include Vue.js. This is the full-fledged version of Vue. I'm not including Vue.min.js, the minimized version. The minimized version does not offer a lot of error diagnostics. So in development, it's always good to include the full version of Vue, okay? So now I fix this mistake. I can reload the page. Sorry, here. Okay, and the console is now clean of errors. So when you develop, always check actually the console before you do anything else to see that your code is actually not breaking immediately, okay? And the Vue tools tell you the state of the Vue variables, okay? So and enables you to track easily what is happening when you affect the page. You see the comment list is an array that is empty, okay, does not have any content, and new comment is empty. Now let me type, while we keep this open actually, let me type here some comment so that you see exactly what happens, and you see the correspondence going on in real time. Sorry, a moment, okay? Okay, good. Now I type hello. And you see that as I type hello in real time, this new comment is being updated in the JavaScript. Okay, this is a one-to-one correspondence. When I click add, you will see that the comment list now is an array containing one element, hello, and the new comment is empty. If I were to modify by hand this comment list by adding one element, I could add an element that says, for example, like I like good jokes. Okay, if I did this, it would appear here. If when I modify the JavaScript, the Vue is modified, the view is modified. Okay, and then now I can say, I don't know, ciao. I can add it, and you see how the correspondence works. Okay, so this is the main advantage of Vue with respect to jQuery. As we have seen, the setup is slightly longer, right? We had here to sorry, let me minimize this. We had here a little bit more setup, you know, we created this app, then we fill it in, we have to specify which variables and which methods are part of the correspondence. But after we do that, mentally we have a much cleaner picture. We have a set of data that is kept in one-to-one correspondence with how the page is laid out. And we can define the methods that are called when events in the page happen. And so we can, the paradigm for development is essentially this. We will get an event, we will modify our JavaScript data structures in response to the event, and the page will be automatically modified to reflect our modifications to the JavaScript data. So we have essentially to worry only about JavaScript. The correspondence between JavaScript and the layout is defined once and for all here in the template. And we just need to worry about putting the right values in our JavaScript variables, and that will be it. A much simpler mental scheme than having to worry about keeping in sync two different pieces. The keeping in sync part is done by Vue.